Brothers, I apologize for the delay. We'll go ahead and get started. We're still waiting for our presenter, Alan, to join the call. Once he does, I'll transfer the presentation back to him. But ultimately, brothers, this session on House Corporation operations is presented by Alpha Fraternity Management and a focus on the top 10 mistakes in managing fraternity operations. Once Alan joined, I'll allow him to do his introduction. But as we go into it, you know, brothers, one of the first and most common mistakes that house corporations make, not just ours, but any house corporations make, are not charging competitive market rental rates. I think some of you all may have already seen it and made adjustments, especially during COVID and post-COVID, with the housing market rates just increasing rapidly. You all may have already made adjustments, which is great, but many house corporations have not. Competitive rental rates are needed, you know, to create more sustainable finances and really put more money in the house corporation's pocket at the end of the day. With the information that's been presented in the welcome session, as well as the previous one from Holmes Murphy, you know, fraternity housing does account for a large percentage of university student housing. So, you know, keep that in mind as far as what implications that may have for your house corporation. Along with this mistake, you know, the rental rates sometimes don't include the value of the amenities that are included. Some of those being internet, cleaning, you know, and so on and so forth. Any other benefits that come with living at the facility. One of the mistakes our house corporations make is, you know, not necessarily looking at the competitive market around them, dorm rates from the university, apartment rates, and any other competitor to fraternity housing, and elevate those market rates accordingly. One thing you'll notice in each of these slides, brothers, is it also does include a typical cost of the mistake and what implications that may have for income. So the first mistake of not charging competitive market rental rates could equate to $20,000 to $40,000 a year for your house corporation, depending on, again, current market rates, but also geographic area. The second mistake house corporations make in operations are having no policies or procedures to guarantee a minimum level of revenue. Some do and some do not have a signed agreement with the chapter to provide a minimum rental revenue, you know, just depending on how the house corporation is set up and what the contractual agreements look like between individual renters or the chapter as a whole. A membership agreement that requires occupancy with penalty for non-compliance, you know, as well as multi-year leases and tiered rent structures. A lot of these are things that could result in a loss of revenue for the house corporation, even if not necessarily thought through fully. So just something to keep in mind, brothers, as you take information back to your house corporation and kind of assess what the next calendar year will look like and beyond. If there are no policies in place that guarantee the house corporation a minimum level of revenue, please consider how you may do so through contractual agreements. The third mistake our house corporations make are not improving the chapter house so it remains as part of that competitive housing. A lot of brothers on this call have undergone capital campaigns and renovation projects, or maybe in the middle of one as we speak. But that is ultimately an added benefit that increases the appeal of living in the facility for our members. Those capital improvements and replacements should be looked at and assessed on an annual basis, you know, and a plan developed based off that assessment. Part of that process is, of course, budgeting adequately and making sure that a certain percentage of the budget is allocated towards projects and renovations. It's part of this mistake and something a lot of house corporations, not just in Phi Gamma Delta, don't do is scheduling recurring improvements, things that have the life expectancy of certain projects and amenities within the facility need to be upgraded on a routine basis. So getting in the schedule and creating and looking ahead, creating future plans, can help your house corporation financially when that time comes. Again, looking at the cost of the mistake, roughly 9,000 to 18,000 a year of lost income and increased expenses on top of that. The fourth mistake some house corporations have made is not having an effective accountability program. Many times, brothers, this goes beyond just the house corporation. Where we see issues at the undergraduate chapter level with the lack of accountability, or even on the graduate advisor level with the undergraduate chapter. But focusing on the house corporation itself, an effective accountability program is key, for potential loss of revenue and potential implications that it could have down the road. So, for example, security deposits at the very beginning of the term, accounting for at least 1 to 1.5 months rent. Some house corporations may charge less than that, or may seek a larger deposit, just depending on prior history and tenant history. Having move-in documentation, a lot of it, brothers, is making sure that everything is accounted for. So documents, contracts, everything is in writing and is reviewed by not just the individual, but potentially the parents of individual brothers, and anyone else that may be part of that lease agreement. Regular inspections and monthly billings for damages and cleanings is just part of that preventative routine, for, in some cases, that may prevent future renovations and projects because of the regular upkeep and inspections that should be scheduled. Part of the inspections is also the move-out process. Doing your due diligence as a house corporation, where if there are damages, taking that deduction out of the security deposit as needed to account for those. Again, compared to the other mistakes, brothers, we're talking a smaller potential implication cost, but one that could be relatively large for your house corporation. The fifth mistake we see from our house corporations is not having an effective collections program. Some of you all may work directly with a company that takes care of the collections efforts for you, and that's great. If not, brothers, here's just some considerations. Some house corporations require payments be made in full before the semester begins. That's a good way, of ensuring that income is coming in regardless of what could happen throughout the year. But making sure that there is a collections program in place and a structure to that program is key. Parent guarantors on leases is important, just to make sure there is a second set of eye on those contracts, but also most 18 to 22-year-olds don't necessarily read everything fully through. So it's helpful to have a parent co-sign on a lease. That way that agreement is accounted for and also followed on. Active follow-up on delinquencies. If there is damage to the property, brothers, not waiting 3-4 months out, but addressing it as needed. Notices to quit, payment plans, and then lastly, national collection agencies. There's ways that we can work with our undergraduate members and our tenants, but at the same time, there needs to be processes in place, to make sure that the house corporation's income is accounted for. So, if your house corporation does not work with a national or a collection agency of sorts, I would encourage you to at least explore that option. Of course, there is going to be the cost implication that comes with it, but as part of that, it could end up saving the house corporation a lot of money in the long run. The sixth most common mistake is not establishing a recurring fundraising program. Of course, in the next few sessions, we're going to talk about fundraising specifically. So, we're not going to beat a dead horse by any means before we even get there. But I think it's important to note, brothers, that a lot of alumni, our graduate brothers and parents of members do want to give back and support the facility and improve the living conditions for their son and the facility. Having that routine and good communication, possibly even hosting an event for graduates or parents at the facility could help increase that drive to donate and that drive to support. But there needs to be that regular communication and that relationship built before the ask happens. Having a compelling message of need, especially if there is a dire need in the facility, that prompt communication is very important to let them know what's actually happening and what is needed at the house corporation level. Some brothers, and some of you on the call may relate to this. Some brothers may not have set foot in the facility for the last 10, 15 years, and they may not understand the condition that some aspects of it may be in. So addressing that compelling need in a message, could yield strong results for your house corporation. Some chapters have annual alumni dues. Whether there's an alumni association in place or a graduate chapter, those dues going directly, at least a portion of those dues going directly to the housing fund is something we've seen be very successful for some house corporations. And then, of course, there's the inevitable capital campaign that happens, let's say, every decade or so. Brothers, before a huge project can be undertaken, there needs to be that routine communication and ask that comes with and updates. So as you prepare, if your house corporation is preparing for a capital campaign, let's say in the near future, just be mindful of what communication has looked like with fellow graduate brothers, as well as parents of members. And then keeping in mind that those parties do want to support, it's just a matter of what the relationship looks like before asking for that support. The seventh most common mistake house corporations have made is not having an excellent food service program. I alluded to it in our welcome. Phi Gamma Delta does have a preferred food service provider, an upper crust food service. But any food service program that's competitive with university programs, as well as outside opportunities in the local community, can really help your house corporation stand out, especially for parents, guests, and most importantly, the members living in the facility. I think we can all agree some of the strongest relationships are built over communal practices like eating dinner together, or having meals, or just sharing a joint experience over food. A lot of relationships are built that way. Having a competitive and an excellent food service program can only help build a stronger brotherhood at the end of the day. From undergraduate members, they do see this as one of the most valued amenities that facility can offer, especially if it is a part of their rent or the cost that goes into living in the facility. It's almost an added benefit. One thing I will strongly suggest is don't leave it up to the chapter to run the food service program. I think all too often we've seen house managers overseeing the project or an undergraduate member overseeing the project when in actuality, it should be the house corporation or a graduate brother specifically assigned to that relationship to continue maintaining that relationship and know how to navigate issues when they arise. Some house corporations, of course, have the grab and go program, but if there is the added potential of the sit down meals and a full food service program, you may be able to see a difference in your house corporation operations, the engagement with the facility, and the overall strength of the brotherhood. a lot of undergraduate men, they want good food. It's easy to go down to the local Chick-fil-A or the local fast food place and get a meal. However, when it's in home and in house, brothers, we've seen a true return on our investment for the house corporations and chapters that have put forth a strong food service program. That doesn't always mean that it is running 7 days a week, 365, and that shouldn't necessarily be the case. Some house corporations and some food service vendors offer the self-serve weekend options or the grab and go over the weekend, which is completely okay. And then of course have the added special meals throughout the year, from Valentine's Day, Christmas, Thanksgiving, and other holidays that may provide an opportunity. Another mistake some house corporations make is not allowing or not having a contract option for out-of-house members. We've seen very often that members not living in the facility do like showing up to the facility to have meals and have that shared experience with their brothers. If your house corporation does not offer that at this point in time, I would at least encourage you to consider adding it to your food service program. The last but most important point, brothers, is understanding that food service is a revenue generator. Again, it does come at a cost to the house corporation, but it really can serve as a revenue generator and bring more income to the house corporation in the long run. The cost of this mistake annually could look anywhere from $8,000 to $16,000 a year of lost income due to not having a food service program or a competitive and excellent food service program. The eighth most common mistake our house corporations have made is not budgeting an allowance for vacancy and credit loss. I think that's an important one, brothers. There's always the unknown that could come during a semester. Everything from, an individual having to drop out of the university, to mental health implications, and any other reason in between that could cause for a potential vacancy through the semester. Some brothers may not just come back to school, post break, or they may not honor their leases, but being able to budget for that can help the house corporation avoid loss of revenue, given the potential vacancies that come in place. I think this also goes back to an earlier point of having the parent co-sign or review the lease with the individual tenant. Some members just won't pay, but having that backing, having parents be a part of that process really allows that backup plan and that push from an external entity to allow the house corporation to receive the revenue that they've been promised and essentially budgeted for. I encourage you, just given this common mistake from some house corporations, I encourage you to try to build an allowance into your annual budget. It may start small and it may grow over the years, but it's got to start somewhere. You see the allowance percentages for a well-run or an average program, and some of those, whatever works for your house corporation, brothers, I defer to you all locally, what's best for your facility and your house corporation. But again, relatively smaller financial implication for this mistake, but one that could save a lot of money in the long run for your house corporation, especially accounting for those vacant rooms and vacant, just vacancies. The ninth most common mistake is not fully maintaining the chapter house and its systems. We talked about regular routine, regular maintenance. However, brother, sometimes the cost can go up to 5 times more if you wait until disaster strikes, and wait until one of those systems ends up breaking rather than repairing it or performing those routine maintenance checkups on those systems. Which leads me to my second point. Having those, whether monthly, bi-monthly, but maintenance checks scheduled is important, brothers, to avoid a very costly mistake for what could be. Having contracts with service providers can provide that routine monthly maintenance schedule. But it's important to try to budget at least 1.5 to 2.5% of the replacement cost in the house corporation's budget annually. You know, some of those, brothers, as you perform your assessments, you may be looking at a project 5-6 years down the road that may need upgrades or needs to be changed. You know, but starting to budget from now can really help put the house corporation in a better financial situation and scenario when that time comes. The 10th mistake is not creating adequate financial reserves. Going back to the earlier session from Holmes Murphy, you know, and a lot of questions that were posed during that session, brothers, chapters are being asked to leave campus a lot more frequently than they ever have, whether that's on the university side, whether that's discipline side, whatever it may be, whatever those implications are. But chapters are being asked to not be a part of the university system or just not be recognized at that university, you know, more often than not nowadays. It's probable that your chapter will have significant problems every 10 to 15 years. I think it's important to just address the elephant in the room. Some chapters just have cycles, you know, and most do. It may be a relatively minor problem, you know, but there are cycles of trouble times that chapters face. So it's important that the house corporation prepares for when those times may come. Chapter houses are lost when there's not adequate financial reserves. You know, if there was, I think the most prevalent example that most of us can relate to is COVID-19, you know, and the loss of essentially members not living in the facility or having to go home, and universities converting to a virtual capacity. A lot of our house corporations suffered during that time. Yours may have been in that boat, but, you know, brothers, I hope it was at least eye-opening to know what type of work needs to be done on the back end to prepare for the unknown and the unforeseen, because we never know when it's going to come. Another important note is that most banks won't lend money if they don't see income. So if your house corporation hasn't built adequate reserves, you know, and can't show growth over time, you know, banks may not necessarily entertain the idea of loans if that ask were to come. From Alpha Fraternity Management, the suggestion is that minimum of 75% of annual budget is for the reserve. So, you know, again, brothers, it's a lot of taking care of what needs to get taken care of now, but preparing for the future. There are some honorable mentions as well. We kind of alluded to this in an earlier point, but, you know, brothers, our 19 to 21-year-old undergrad members, in most cases, don't have a lot of training or business experience. They don't necessarily know how to manage a chapter house or a food service program, but your professional experience and your expertise in the field is really what helps drive and sustain house corporations. Another one is believing that alumni volunteers are going to be able to consistently provide the level of effort needed to deliver quality housing program. Our graduates aren't always going to be there. You know, and brothers that do graduate may not always have a strong connection to the facility or the house. You know, so it's important to not just tap alumni volunteers, you know, but potentially target parents and other entities that may be able to support the house corporation, you know, not just this year, but beyond. Brothers, here's just kind of a breakdown of what the cost of the mistakes could cost your house corporation on an annual basis. Those numbers are eye-opening and you know, kind of startling to some extent for some preventative measures that could have been done and taken throughout the year or years before. So we're not going to jump into, you know, each figure on this table, but, you know, brothers, it's important that the most important thing I want to note on this is the last point, that in some cases, not maintaining adequate cash reserves could lead to the loss of a chapter house. Not necessarily always the case. And I don't want to sit here and say that that is always the case, but there is that possibility. So that preparation for the future is really key. Brothers, I'm happy to field any questions you may have. I may defer to John to answer some of these as well if they do come in. So let's just open it up for a minute or two if anyone does have any questions.
Yeah, if I could add just a little bit of background. Those numbers were based on what I believe to be a 35 person house and the house value of around $2 million. Just for demonstration purposes. I know there was some text and some answers during the presentation. Does anybody else have questions that they'd like to ask?
I have one question, John. The presenter was not here. The presenter is Alpha Management. What is that?
Yeah, they're a professional property management company specializing in fraternities and sororities. And Alan, for some reason, didn't make it. Don't know why. And Dio, great job on the fly picking up on that.
Is Alpha a national company or local?
They are. They're based in Michigan.
Okay.
And they would be a company that I would recommend that you talk to if you're interested in property management.
Okay. Dio, you know my biggest gripe. Even in Alpha's thing, it talks about communications. And without communications to our alumni, house corporations won't survive. And, you know, I've been in charge of our newsletter for Penn State for Gamma Phi for years. And I've had a great relationship with National in formatting our newsletter that we email out to begin with. And then National would format it and have it sent out. And we've always paid for it, but it's economical because you can use your nonprofit mailing. Why did they stop? Cost cuts? How many, do you have any idea how many chapters used their service?
Off the top of my head, I don't, Bill.
Okay.
It wasn't a large number.
Okay. I mean, I know Pennington does it, and one of the fellows there, I've talked to JB and we've been playing phone tag, and I know we can get it done locally, but it just costs a lot more than we're used to spending. I'll wait and hear Pennington's pitch.
Hey, Bill, I was going to let Dio do my presentation too, since he did such a nice job.
Thanks for showing up, Rod.
Certainly.
Brothers, any more questions? All right. Brothers, our next session will begin in just a moment on financial operations with Omega Phi. So again, please use your conference program to join us for that next link, and we'll see you in the next breakout.